I wrote this week about this, how Orrick, the law firm, spun off this company Joinder, and that Joinder launched its product that it's been working on. It's been actually kind of working on this product for a while, and it was working on it as part of Orrick Labs. And now Orrick has kind of officially spun off Joinder as a separate company, and they've rolled out the product. And I think apart from just the interesting part about all of that, about this being developed through Orrick Labs and then spinning off as a separate company, I actually think the product is really interesting. But essentially, it's I mean, they're calling it a system of record for corporate legal departments, for corporate legal departments to kind of manage all of their legal work, whether it's transactional or compliance work or litigation work or legal ops work or whatever else, through a single platform. And I think it's a real problem. I mean, I've never worked in a corporate legal department, but from people I talk to all the time, one of the big problems with corporate legal departments is simply this issue of you're working with lots of different law firms and lots of different outside vendors, and those law firms and vendors have traditionally kind of called the shots in terms of what systems you're using, how information gets shared, how documents get shared, how they get managed and calendared, and all of that. And so the real idea of this is to basically provide a platform in which corporate legal departments can take control of all of this legal work, all of this information that's going on through all of their firms and vendors and internally, and manage it. I've only seen a little bit of it. I haven't really gotten into it in any deep way, but it looks pretty good. And I think it's one of those things where kind of surprised that somebody hasn't done this earlier. I've seen attempts to do this, like in the e-discovery space, where they've tried to create products for legal departments to manage all of their e-discovery among different law firms in different cases and everything through a single vendor. But this goes beyond even that. So I know, Zach, I know you guys wrote about it too. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I think Frank Reddy wrote about this one for us. And the only thing I'd add, particularly from the business standpoint of how they did this, is they specifically did want to spin this off, not have it as a subsidiary, not sell it through the law firm. And one thing that I think was interesting that they told Frank is not only the business of it, but actually attracting development talent and other talent to the company. One of the co-founders was an attorney, head of the technology practice at Orrick, who is now leaving to actually run this company. And he said, if we were part of a law firm, we probably wouldn't be able to get the type of talent that we're going to get as a standalone company. It's a lot easier to say, we're a startup, we're on our own, we're trying to do something innovative and start this market that Bob just talked about, versus come work for a law firm where you have all this red tape and you're going to be associated with the law firm in that way. A lot of engineers, and particularly people in Silicon Valley where Orrick is located, may not want to do that as much. So a different way of thinking about legal tech development in that way.
Yeah, it's not only that, but it's, trying to, when you're part of the law firm and you're trying to attract talent that is in engineering or coding or anything like that, you have a inherent problem, and you can't offer any ownership in the firm. So you're basically going to say you get a salary as long as you work here, and that's it. And part of the attraction of many startups is, well, we can't afford to pay you a whole lot now, but here's some stock options. So that's another reason, I think, to look at having business people have ownership stakes in law firms. And that was the article that I cited. It's kind of, we talked about it before, but there was a great quote from Daniel Wild at Lawyer on Call, which is the I guess you'd call it a law firm. It's owned by people that aren't all lawyers, But I thought it was really insightful for what he said. He said, I've worked for 14 years in private practice, and now I get to be an attorney. I don't have to do marketing. I don't have to worry about billing and collections. I don't have to go and find my own clients. I get to just do legal work. And, I was thinking about that. And the legal market is one of the few marketplaces where, the person that designs the product, the person that makes the product, the person that sells the product, the person that prices the product, and the person that takes care of all the internal accounting is the person that makes the product, right? And that's it. I mean, it's the lawyer, and I don't know of any other business quite like that. And I think a lot of it lays at the feet of these ownership rules that, at least in the United States, we've been saddled with for as long as we have. Well, maybe not as long as we've been practicing, but certainly for a very long time.
Yeah, although in fairness, I mean, certainly larger firms are bringing in professionals who do all of those different parts of it. They're bringing in pricing professionals and financial professionals, and all of those other parts of it. So if the firm has the financial wherewithal to be hiring those kinds of people, then the lawyers are still free to practice law and not have to worry about all that stuff.
I guess that's true, Bob, but the practical limitation is, the clout and stature that those people have in many law firms, and it's understandable. If I'm a partner in a law firm, I have liability as a partner. My income depends upon the partnership decisions, and if you have somebody come in without an ownership stake who doesn't have the same risk and interest, and maybe not the same interest level, I'm looking at those people a little differently than I look at my partners who, if everything goes to, I'll use a British term here, if everything goes to shit, we're all in it together, right? And whereas the person without an ownership interest is free to say, well, boy, that was too bad. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, and I definitely think, kind of like you hear about the caste system in law firms, is if you're not a lawyer, your opinion doesn't really matter. And I think, like, for technologists and people that want to design and really create something useful and profitable in the legal space, they'll maybe say there's only so much I can do on a law firm, and maybe they'll just take it to legal tech. So it kind of makes sense with Orrick. Like, I don't know if they were necessarily thinking, oh, there's only so far you can go with attached to a law firm. But in that space, I think kind of like the creativity and the entrepreneurship is, you're kind of capped at how much you can do in a law firm. So makes sense.
My question, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. So how much? So I'm not as familiar with Joinder as you are, Bob, or probably most people. But my question is about Teams, like Microsoft. It seems to me with these kind of systems, that you're placing yourself in competition to a large extent with Microsoft. And I don't know how much you think that there's an overlap with Teams. That obviously Teams is being used. Corporate legal teams are far further ahead than law firms in using Teams, and it seems to me, from reading about what Joinder can do, that there's a great overlap, and actually competing with Microsoft is never a great idea.
Well, no, it definitely looks like a mashup of, Teams and, I don't know, Net Documents and Slack and, a bunch of things that are out there, but it looks like an elegant mashup of it all. And more purpose built for a specific application. So I do think certainly the argument could be made that a lot of what they're trying to do on that level could be done on Teams or something like that. But
which is part of your 365 stack. When you think about what you can do now in the cloud, and it's like you can do all the stuff about potentially DMS, like calendar management, task management. I'm reading your thing, Bob. And it does, and Teams is across the whole, I don't know, I find it, I'm not being poo-pooing it or discouraging, but I just think it's really interesting. I think that law firms, as a general observation, I agree with, I like the idea of the entrepreneurship and the giving people, these types of roles, but I do really think that law firms have to be careful about where they're competing with Microsoft, unless there's very strong, now firms moving to the cloud, it's part of 365. I think firms generally have to be really careful about that, personally.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that Microsoft is interested in competing with its customers. So there's a little bit of a distinction depending on how big the market goes with that, though. So yeah, so I'm
I
not.
think it's a natural where they're coming up with products that are, for example, overlap heavily with teams. It's not that they're trying to compete necessarily with law firms, but just that by necessity, corporate legal teams are using Teams, and it comes as part of their Microsoft stack. So it's just as a general observation as to whether, you know, I do think that, and I do think Teams is doing some, that you can do some really cool stuff, and that does seem to be, they're investing billions in it. It's just as a general observation that I think that, you know, law firms, when they're looking at what they're going to come to market with, I think the risk overlapping with Microsoft is always risky. I think personally right now, they're investing so much, and they are now obviously interested in the legal space again.
I've been asking this question a lot about Microsoft too, because I've been wondering why Microsoft hasn't been a bigger player in this business. And the answer I've been getting is that they don't want to compete with their customers. But what if their customers start competing with them? Then will that dynamic change? I mean, Microsoft could come in and just trounce a lot of these companies, or buy them up, or whatever, and change the dynamic.
Well, I mean, sorry, you go.
No, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say that Microsoft, obviously, we've been speaking a lot to people like John Kefalukas. They're doing a lot of work with Microsoft for legal now. They've got Office 365 for legal, and they're very much interested. And their key objective is to get law firms to be quicker to adopt Teams. So they're very much interested. Again, I think, you know, we could argue that we've seen this happen before, and that Microsoft has been, if you're listening, John, I love you, but they can be very flaky as far as the legal sector is concerned. But right now, I think they see huge potential. But just by necessity, I think that with this type of thing, there's going to be competition.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, go ahead, Zach.
I was just going to say, when I've talked to people in the past about this thing too, because Microsoft's name has been floated out there for M&A for a few times as well. And I think ultimately it's just come down to the dollar signs. Legal in itself, legal technology in particular, just doesn't get the return on investment that a lot of the bigger enterprise technologies have. Now, that seems to maybe be slowly changing with a lot of investment coming into the industry and legal technology starting to be a bigger business. So will you see somebody like a Microsoft or even an Oracle increasingly come into this space? I think you could see it, but that's what I've been told in the past.
Yeah, I was going to say something kind of similar to that, because over the years, Microsoft has kind of come and gone in legal. I mean, there was maybe 5 years ago, or maybe longer than that even, they did have a big dedicated whole unit around legal and a big push in legal, and then it just kind of dissipated. And the only real reason I ever heard was that it just wasn't worth it for them to put the money into putting all that effort into legal when law firms were buying their product anyway. I mean, their core product. And they didn't have to make a special push into it. I mean, you know, in terms of Microsoft, I think the really interesting, I think this acquisition last week of Nuance, where until a year ago, my wife was a lawyer and got rid of all her stock when she left, I'm sorry to say. But I think that move into medical is really, really interesting. It's a huge area. And also voice recognition. I mean, Nuance, you know, is the tech that powers Siri and pretty much all the voice recognition programs out there. So that has huge potential for Microsoft and really for any number of markets, I think.
Certainly for the legal market, that's what caught my eye about that particular announcement this week. That I think there's a lot of implications there for legal, even though they're focusing on medical right now. But the other thing I wanted to add was that when you started describing this at the start of this software, at the very start of your piece here, Bob, it rang a bell, and I had to do a little research. In 2018 at Legal Week, when I was talking to Justin Hectus, I wrote about this on Above the Law. He was the Chief Information Officer at Kiesel, Young & Logan, and he was talking about an initiative that they were doing at that law firm. And then halfway through the conversation, when he and I were just talking about that product or what they were trying to do and corporate law departments in general, in the middle of the conversation, he said, and this has stuck with me, and I actually went back and talked to a bunch of people about it. He said, you know, what would be really cool, and there's just nothing out there like this, is a product for corporate legal departments so they can track what all the different law firms are doing, and they can control what's happening and know what's going on with the process. And I've just never seen anything quite like that. And I went back and talked to people, and I felt like if I wasn't at my case, and I I love legal tech, but I wouldn't say I have the most entrepreneurial spirit in terms of about to start a company. But I was like, that is a fantastic idea. And it sounds like someone is doing exactly that now from what you're talking about. So it was super interesting to hear for me to hear that, because I had to go back in time and figure out where I'd heard that idea and why it sounded so familiar. And it was from this conversation at Legal Week, which is another reason why Legal Week is so great, because those conversations just gel and stuff comes up. But super interesting
Yeah.
that someone's actually doing it now.
Yep. And also interesting, speaking of Kiesel, because they were just in the news for having hired Jeff Marple, who used to run legal ops at Liberty Mutual, into their Kiesel Propulsion Labs, as they call it.